what happens in childhood isn't because you are a bad parent that your children, it's a scheme of the enemy.
To then put shame on you as well.
Right.
So your shame feeds their shame.
Yeah. There we go.
Shame fest. Here we are at home in my home.
Yes, we are.
And we are so thrilled to have Christian with us today. Christian Bevere, who is one of the Bevere ladies. We're just a full package now. I feel like there wasn't a moment of like, here we are. It's complete. It is
No, it is.
I have wondered what this would feel. I bet you have wondered longer than me.
I still remember walking on the beach with you, and you were really concerned that the boys were going to marry a girl that would put her makeup on before she even came down for coffee. And we believe in coffee first. We believe in walking down, yes, brush your teeth, but no makeup. And coffee was really an important part of our culture.
It was. I just didn't want anyone setting the standard at a level I just wasn't going to be willing to rise to.
Yeah, I get it.
So Christian is also a first
Glad
thing.
I could drink coffee with you guys
Without
any makeup on.
It works.
And we're glad to have you here to
Thank
talk
you.
with us.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for this conversation because it's
an important one.
It comes up so naturally too. Christian and I were just at a birthday dinner last night. It was magical. It was in someone's backyard.
And why was I not included? I actually
You have to take that up
feel
with
a little
Sarah.
bit of shame on this. Yeah.
It was this like cottage that was built into a hill, so it had different levels. Really sweet. Kind of reminded me of a Hobbit house.
I thought the same thing.
And we're under these trees, and the conversation so naturally went to the place of shame and the different places in people's lives. And I know most conversations don't naturally go that deep.
Yeah, I was going to say.
When Christian and I are
In a
both,
Hobbit
And we didn't
house,
prompt it
shame
either. I wanna-
comes immediately to mind. That's
there was two tables. One was talking about like ventriloquism, and the other was like, what's the place of shame in your life? I'm like, oh, that's my table.
Yeah, you're like, I'm sitting with the shame girls.
And we're like, oh, I love your story. What's your name again?
And someone new would come and we'd be like, so tell us yours, legitimately. But they went there. So this area of shame and where people really do want to talk about it, they want to get it out. They want a safe place to share and move through this. But before we get to that, Christian, on At Home, we have something called the burning question.
Endearing.
I have a burning question for you. Not myself, actually. Hope Van Such, which is really interesting. That's her name, not her name.
Username.
Just her username.
Yeah.
Hope Van Such. She said, do you have one tip on how I help my child who is a perfectionist?
Is that fair? Is that fair? Christian has a child that just turned 1.
No, Christian was a child
Oh, she was a
who is
a
Speaking of deep
perfectionist.
stories.
true. Yeah, no.
How long do we have?
I'm not thinking of Azariah, who is just perfect by nature.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to
He
be
has
a
an easy out. I mean,
perfectionist.
no, I can very much relate. And the first thing that comes to mind is to take up your own tendencies around perfectionism. That is such an undervalued, like we see problems and we want to attack it of like, well, I care for you, so I'm going to help you work this thing out in your life. But there was actually a study I read recently where they took rats of all this conversation was going beautifully, but they took rats and they did a type of shock therapy and association pattern. And they saw how that trickled down to their children through a DNA response. And so it showed that how we take on our fears, we take on our tendencies, that's actually passed down to our children from the moment of conception.
Wow.
That can sound daunting and scary, but the beautiful thing is as we work on what we feared, when our kids come up against it, we can actually show them this is the path of how to work through that, work through the good desires in it and the negative roads you can take. I heard someone say a quote of like, everything that we have that can be a negative in our life has a positive alternative.
Yeah.
And perfectionism is really linked to shame in the matter of we feel inadequate within. So we think if we can just do enough or we can be blemish free, then no one will see what's actually going on and the depths of our soul. And it's such a lie. It's really, I think perfectionism is a key derivative of shame, but it's also this hamster wheel, mentioning a lot of rodents. So sorry, it's not normally in my conversation loop, but it perpetuates that cycle. So I think if we can actually find out what breaks perfectionism in our lives, we can help other people find these beautiful roads out of what can be a negative, and find a way of how do we achieve excellence? How do we strive for beauty? And yeah, it's just undervalued. What we do in ourselves is actually just becomes a testimony even to our children.
So for hope, you would say, examine the way that you yourself
Wrestle with perfection.
Yes.
Yeah, especially within your childhood.
Yes.
Because I think it's easier for us to see that within our children when they come against it and block it out of our own childhood and make excuses or say, well, it didn't really matter. I didn't go through that much. No, there's roots there. And if you know how to uncover those in your life, you're more equipped to uncover them in your children's life as well.
Do you have an example outside of the rats where you have addressed perfectionism in your life?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the book alone was
Wait, we
reading.
need to say that, though.
Yeah.
You wrote a book.
I did. Wrote a book called Break Up With What Broke You. Insert perfectionism if that is what you're struggling with. Shame, regret, comparison. I wrote the book and it was due, the manuscript was due a month after my son was born, which in my perfectionism mind before my son was here, I was like, I got this. I'm going to have this baby and then he's going to be resting on me and I'm going to be typing. That was so not the case. Especially our sweet boy had so many stomach issues at first where I was like, I don't even know what sleep is like. I don't know how to spell anything. And it really took me out of even the ability to strive for perfectionism. I don't think I was healed of perfectionism, but I couldn't even tap into that pattern. And I had to solely say, God, this is your words. Even if I can't remember what I wrote yesterday through you, you were leading this. And it's what it's supposed to be. I think a common loop of perfectionism is thinking whatever we say, whatever we do, it has to live on as this constant like litany of all the things we've done or who we're supposed to be because of this is who we are on paper. This is who I am to so-and-so. But it's really just, effervescent, I think, to be living in the present and living in tune with God's Spirit and just saying, like, I trust you today. And I trust you that what you supply today is substantial for tomorrow and worthy of yesterday. And so my perfectionism was really healed a lot through writing this book and coming to a breaking point, which I love that that's the title, Break Up With What Broke You. We can have moments of feeling like we're lost, feeling like we're broken, and that can just continue on to the shameful habit in our life. Or we can say, I recognize this, I'm going to own it so it can no longer own me.
Yeah. And I like that you said part of owning it is recognizing the breaking as being so purposeful and pivotal, those moments where you cannot even pretend to keep up any kind of a facade of perfectionism. Right. I feel that way about having 4 children. Like,
I was going to say, I feel like you and I probably don't wrestle with perfectionism.
It just gets sloughed off in those moments of, I can't even pretend. Like I was in my mid-20s with 4 kids, trying my best to pretend like I had some kind of a degree in motherhood. And yet it was through the process that you learn. And so eliminating the need to prove yourself constantly, that you're worthy of belonging, that you're worthy of love. 'Cause I feel like that is so much of where shame will convince us you're not worthy of belonging. You're not worthy of love. And then, like you said, with the hamster wheel, we start operating in that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Lisa, I know you have been digging so deep for your book. We're just a family of books.
It's how we process, right?
Yeah, therapy.
And a lot of our conversations recently have naturally gone towards, and also because of the stages where my children are at, recognizing so much confusion around sexuality and gender in our world right now. How do you feel like shame has really played a pivotal part in that?
Well, and that's interesting because, I think almost every single one of my books, I dive into the same scripture from a different angle. And it's Psalm 139. And it's where David is talking about himself. He's saying, how marvelous are your works, O God. And he's talking specifically about himself being this marvelous work of God. And it's crazy because in the ESV it says, I know this full well. And when I read that David knew it full well, I thought, yeah, I feel like guys have no problems with knowing that full well. I mean, John Bevere is in his 60s. He's embraced intermittent fasting. He has lost his waistline on his pants from a 34 to a 30. And he is posing for me on a regular basis. Like,
I love that.
I know this full well. Like, there is no body shame with John. He is like, did you even imagine your husband would look this good in his 60s? And I was like, I couldn't even dream of that. But women do not process their bodies that way.
Yeah.
Women should, but they look at their bodies in a mirror and think that their body is less than, because I think men acknowledge that their bodies are gifts from God, but women have a tendency to think that their bodies are objects of shame, that they have to hide it, whether it's a perverted view of modesty or whether it is some kind of assignment. You know, you're not thin enough, you're not curvy enough, you're not young enough, you're not tall enough, whatever. It's always, to the women, it's always a not enough. And I know for me, having grown up with feeling this not enough at all times, whether it spun me into an eating disorder from the time I was 15 to the time I was 21, then it had translated itself with sexually inappropriate behavior, because I went from being a young girl that connected with the value of her femininity. Because I was a tomboy, I went right to my sexuality. And so, looking for things of power. And then
what would have been the healthy trajectory
I think
there?
the healthy trajectory is what I see you developing with your daughters. Like, you have this beautiful physical body that has the power to carry and create life. And modesty isn't about hiding it from men, but it is about treasuring what you've been given, and making sure that we live our lives in a stewardship where we take care of our body. We don't leverage it for control or approval, or once we've misused it, just put on a garment of shame.
Yeah.
And, I think that one of the things that I love about your book, Christian, is you address the difference between having done something that you're ashamed of and taking shame on as an identity.
Yeah.
Because shame is a signal. Like, when you do something wrong, it's okay to feel ashamed of your choice. It's not okay to stay in that place.
Yeah.
And going back, and again, I want to throw this back to you after this, but going back to Christianity, it's interesting. When I got saved, I understood the weight of my poor choices. I understood regret. I understood consequences. And the gospel was presented to me in such a generous, loving way that I embraced it with all of my heart, all of my soul, all of my body, all of my strength. But somewhere along the line, I began to think what was a gift now needed to be earned. And I don't know when that exchange means, because what I had this standard, because we're talking about perfection, is that we have a God that says, be thou perfect as I am perfect. So what he is doing is perfecting us. He is perfecting us, not we perfect ourselves. And as I behold him, not as I behold my failures, not as I behold my mistakes, there's a mercy reset every single morning for a reason. But for me, I don't know where it became this exchange of, yes, he gave his life for me to have his life and to be completely forgiven of all the things I did before I became a Christian. But now that I know better, shame is back on me. And that became such a interesting exchange for me, where, and even in the church, I remember feeling this. I talk to young girls and I say, hey, listen, this is what Jesus did in my life. This was my past. And people would say, don't tell them what your past was. And I'd be like, well, why should I be ashamed of that? Why wouldn't I want to talk about the things? Because things that live in darkness and shadow grow, and things that live in light they're revealed. God takes the refining from it. And I love that you've done this with your book, where you've said, okay, I'm going to shine some light. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure this book was cathartic for you. You know, I feel like when I write a book, it's like putting a puzzle together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was one of the things that was the most surprising that you found women connect with when you talk, or you felt the Holy Spirit breathe on in this message of actually releasing from shame?
Well, I think everything we're sharing is so pivotal. And a lot of, I see women's shame is from an instance of around their sexuality.
Yeah.
And even like what you're saying, it's often rooted in something that happened that was a precursor to that. Yeah. So for me, I felt the same way of like, you know, skipping forward a little bit, but I had this instance of regret and shame, and I felt like I'd worked through it. But then as soon as I was marrying a righteous man, there was like that second wave of shame, I like to say, is it comes back.
Absolutely.
Of like, oh, are you sure you're
I think all three of us had
sure?
second wave shame. Yes.
Third, fourth, fifth wave shame.
And for me writing this, it really was a confrontation of, do I believe this? And do I know this, like you're saying, full well? But I can even look back at my own life and see instances of, you know, now regret and perfectionism and shame. And to what you said is so valid. Like every single one of us has regrets, and we will still have regrets of like, oh, I could have done that better. I could have been a better friend, a better wife. That is not the problem. That in itself is not it. Like you're saying, it's a chance for refinement. It's a chance for redirection and coming back to Jesus and just saying like, please continue to prune me. Please continue to better me. But shame is an inability to separate what I've done from who I am or who I was. It's still somehow connected, even though it's been 10 years, even though my heart has changed. I've repented to the Lord. And I think that is just that festering of when something's in the dark, even if you've exposed it. I think the time amount of when we've kept this to ourselves, when we've carried the burden, like it takes not time of like you have to go X amount of years before you're allowed to be free from it, but it just takes time to like unweave it. Like there's prongs, I think, in shame that to me, I thought it was something worth writing about because it can connect to all these other areas of comparison, insecurity. Sometimes it's not enough to just say, well, I'm not going to compare myself anymore. You have to say, why was I comparing? What do I believe about myself that was needed to be compared to because I didn't think God did an adequate enough job in that area? And when I have amazing Christian family. They instilled beautiful beliefs in me. And for a long time, I believed them until I think the dirt hit the road and you're a teenager, you're having relationships and friendships, and you're just coming up against questions in your mind that are attached to certain things of, you know, for me, my parents split when I was really young. And for a while I wondered, did I play a part in that? What is my lovableness equated to? Do I need to be the perfect daughter? And then coming into this, when you start dating, you just carry all this stuff underlying. And I love that you're speaking to your daughters about that at a young age, because if you don't know how to process that, you process it with the wrong people, the wrong arenas. And
and you're vulnerable.
You are.
Yeah.
And you're just exposed. And like for me, I wanted to be desired so bad and like loved so bad because I wasn't sure if I was desirable or lovable.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily, like at one point I thought I was going to be a nun. I was just like, I could do without all that. But I still
had holy water
ran
in my bedroom.
But I still ran to the opposite sex approval.
Yeah.
Not even that like, oh, there's like this lure and this lust and attraction.
But
I
wonder
just
if that's
wanted
because
to be
your
loved.
dad was gone.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I looked for men who were hard to please and
You wanted to please your dad.
hard to keep.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to please my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And John was the first. John was so vastly different. And I know you have a redemptive story and you have a redemptive story. And I had to come to the place where I realized none of us get what we deserve. We all deserve judgment and we get mercy. And so it isn't because I'd done everything right or, well, in my case, or done everything wrong that I saw the goodness of God. And and so, I mean, I do resonate with that because my parents were divorced twice. Julie's parents were divorced twice. I mean, we've got some similarities here. And yet until one generation, what you were talking about with the rats, going back to the rats at the beginning, when one generation, which it sounds like you've made that determination, I know you've made that determination, I know I made the determination, the epigenetics, the sins of the fathers, the regret of wrong choices, the pattern stops with me.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, like I am not going to see my children inherit the bad, unhealthy patterns because I'm going to own the responsibility. Right. And when you see the children of Israel, when they would come before God, they would confess not only their sins, but the sins of their forefathers. When you think, well,
and
they
the
didn't do
people
anything.
around them, like the way cities were judged.
Yes, and so there comes this place where you say, I'm not going to blame my dad. I'm not going to blame my mom. I'm not going to blame that boy, that girl, that whoever it was that made you feel less than or shame. I'm going to take on all of the guilt that I need to own because I'm going to take the generations forward into a place of redemption.
It's beautiful.
Well, and honestly, Lisa, Christian and I are positioned to do that well because you've chosen to do it. Like we are married to your sons, to your offspring, and you made us put a stake in the ground and said it ends here. And so for us to be able to walk into really fertile ground, to say, yes, we're going to continue that. Because it's almost like when something happens specifically with sexuality, and I'm seeing this in our 12-year-old daughter and 13-year-old son, who they will make mistakes, will move through the mistake, but then this, like, it's almost like a blanket of shame will try to come on. And I'm watching it as their parent, but also kind of object as much as I can, like, oh, that's almost the real objective for the enemy. Like, yes, there's the initial
There's the
sin,
incident,
but the
then there's the
shame
cloak of shadow.
opportunity,
Yeah.
that feels like the main objective, because if the enemy of our souls can do that when we are young, if he can set that pattern in place, there is so much opportunity later on. And you're almost like, I don't know why I make the decisions I make, why I'm drawn to the men that I'm drawn to, but I just am. It's just how I am. It's my nature. And recognizing, no, there's an opportunity as parents to say, this is going to be different. This is going to be different starting today, even for people who are recognizing, like, oh, wow, I've even weaponized shame, because I've seen that too, where you're like, oh, they feel bad. Like you said, there's an initial, I'm ashamed of the decision I made. Right. But then this cloak of you are shame, the identity of the mistake you made, that is who you are, and that is how you're going to operate. So as parents, like cutting through that, just very intensely saying, no, that's not who you are. Here's what you did. Here's how we're moving forward. Because we're reading a book about habits with Asher and Sophia. And what he's saying is that if you can go after the identity, and he's saying it in a positive way, like, I am not a smoker. Helps you to make the decision to no longer smoke. But then you look at it on the flip side. If you can go after the identity of someone, saying like, shame is who you are, the habits just follow.
Oh, yeah. Like, I am anxious, so that's why I'm feeling anxiety. And I hope what you're saying, I think, is really profound for any parent listening, is what happens in childhood isn't because you are a bad parent that your children, it's like, it's a scheme of the enemy.
To then put shame on you as well.
Right.
So your shame feeds their shame.
There we go.
Shame fest.
Yes, which is why that one moment in time. So Christian, you've got somebody out there and they're a young woman or a young mother, and they're saying, I don't know how to stop the pattern. What would you say to them in this moment? Like, what is something that you learned, like, as you embraced? I mean, like, let's all just say God's mercy. As we embrace God's mercy, what did God grace you to move into?
Yeah, they're experiencing that themselves. Their own shame.
They're out there and they're like, I want more from my daughter. I want more from my son, but I am still captive.
Yeah. Well, I think you were scratching at something, and we're talking about the Israelites. I mean, the very people of God's heart that walked with God, that knew him so intimately, still experience like this level of regret and making the wrong mistakes and shame that I would argue with that. And I love in Lamentations 2:14, it says, expose your iniquity to restore your fortunes.
It's beautiful. There's that legacy, the exchange.
Yeah.
My iniquity for his blessing.
Right.
Yeah.
And but you have to expose it.
Yeah.
And shame will always tell you you're
Cover
so
it.
much dirtier than anyone else. No one's going to listen. They're going to judge you. And I felt that way even when I was in small groups, even when I had good community. And until you cross that threshold, like I think you actually do need other people because it's such a deep, dark pit. Like you need people that are going to shine light. They're going to journey with you to get out of that hole. And like you're saying, remind you, you are not what you did. I see you as this person and confirm because you have this voice in the back of your head saying all the opposite and contrary to who God actually made you to be. And I just remember hearing those things and moving from that, it was, okay, I'm going to expose it. I'm going to admit I've messed up. I've hurt people. People have hurt me. But what does it look like to move forward? And then as I was uncovering these things, I was like, okay, I did that. And it would almost push me back down because I was like, I did that? I'm realizing, like you're saying, when you were set free, I can't believe I did that. I was this person. And I think having the grace to remember in your admittance, it's almost like your get out of jail free card. And Lisa, I just remember finally getting to a point sitting in my room thinking, I'm no longer going to let this shame intimidate me to a place of moving forward. And I just said, God, like, show me how to move through this. And I was actually driving one day. This was after I was married, where I felt like I had detached from shame, but I still questioned, like, God, did you make a mistake in putting me where I am? Like, could you really redeem my story? And I think we all feel that to some level, no matter what your background is. And he told me, I am at the center of it all. Like, I'm actually doing something to restore you that glorifies me.
Yeah.
And he reminded me, I believe it's Isaiah 41 or 40, and the idea of a double blessing. And I felt so gracious in that moment to know how far God would go to redeem his daughters.
Wow.
And how good his love is to draw us near. And I just thought, you know what? Like, what the enemy meant for evil, God is redeeming. I messed up. I don't deserve this, like you're saying. But because of his kindness and because he goes after his bride, I get to know what a healthy marriage looks like. The thing I questioned, the thing I dreamed for and disqualified myself, he says, no, let me not only lead you to that, but show you how to do it. Rely on me.
Yeah.
And I've just seen that be so true, whether it's in my own life or people I talk to, anyone listening, like there's a double portion blessing where, no, we don't deserve this, but we walk in it because God led us there. And I would encourage anyone, or let me say this, it went from feeling all of the things that I had done as like mistakes that were weighing over me, like skeletons in my closet that once someone found out, they would push me away. And so I had to wear this mask of perfection to thinking, yeah, I did that. And that's no longer me. And like this liberation of, I'm not ashamed of this because I know it no longer serves me and I no longer serve it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. You know, and I want to say, when you say the double portion blessing, a lot of time people do not understand that the blessing of God is the intangible force to take everything that is tangible in your life to a place of health and strength and provision. And I think a lot of times we think of double blessing as double money, double cars, double houses.
One pot of gold too.
Yes, exactly. as you would say, since your family's from Ireland. But double pasta. But
Double rainbow.
I do believe in the double pasta blessing.
Yes,
That's accurate.
but really, I think it's saying, not in blessing, I will bless you. I'll bless you, but I will also bless your children. And I think God is always a generational God. And so he will set something in motion that is like a blessing for you so that you can be a blessing to others.
Yes.
And anytime we have blessing, it's meant to extend to other people.
Yes.
And so I just want to thank you for writing this book and redeeming what could have been shameful, for addressing what is holding a lot of people captive. And I love that we have this incredible opportunity to come into people's homes, their cars. I have people all the time tell me they listen to it every single day, the podcast. And I just want you, Christian, to pray over that person that has been hiding from addressing that shame. And that shame has been robbing them. It has been shadowing and shading everything in their life. Can you pray for them right now?
I can, yeah. And I just want to Thank you for the space that y'all are creating,
Yeah.
for having the space to come into people's homes.
You'll have to come back.
Maybe we'll see. If that double pasta is still on the table, I'll come back for sure. But so much of what I've shared, you have empowered me to share, and you have lived well. So I want to honor that before I pray.
Well, thank you. And I will just be really clear. Like, I feel like John and I are the warrior pioneers, take the land, stab the ground, but you guys have settled it and caused it to become beautiful and flourish. So I love that.
Well, like you said, it's generational. So, but yes, I would love to pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much that through our words, you are actually extending a hand to your daughters, that you were saying that you heal the brokenhearted, that you are close to those that feel far away, Lord. And I just thank you that you are redemptive, that it is your nature, that you write the best comeback stories, Lord. And I just pray for the woman that feels like she has disqualified herself or she is too far gone. And I thank you that your word says otherwise, that you show us how to heal, how to be redeemed in you. And I just thank you that you give us this opportunity. And I pray for anyone listening, Lord, just to have the full liberation of shame, that you would just be a chain breaking moment in their lives today, this week, that you will surround them with the right community, Lord, and just stillness to hear you and to allow you into the places that feel vulnerable. Yeah. And God, I ask that as they make a step towards you and they seek you with their whole heart, that you will be found and that they will find peace, restoration, and identity within you alone. And we thank you for this space. I thank you for what you're doing in Lisa and Juli and this podcast. Amen.
Amen. And I know that we're going to put it in the show notes how you can get a hold of Christian's book. You can break up with what has broke you. So that is exciting.
Thanks for coming, Christian. It's been great. You guys are awesome.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us again at Home with the Beveres, where we are so passionate about helping you create a legacy starting at home. If you haven't already, go right ahead and like and subscribe. And guys, as well, leave us a comment below, because whenever you leave a comment, it helps us curate content that can help so many other people. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next time at Home with the Beveres.